You are here to live a specific story. That story has to be lived only by you. You are not in this world by accident. The universe is planting new twists, new turns in your story every day. If you drop the seriousness and attachments, it is going to cultivate your awareness. If you live it through your mind, then it's going to bring you suffering. Play your roles, but don't become them. Don't let the narrative of your mind interfere in the natural flow of your story. The natural flow may not fulfill your demands and expectations. It may even trigger you at points, but it will also empower you at some other situations. But that's what a good story does. It surprises you and teaches you when you're least expecting it. This episode is about healing. And let me tell you one thing about healing. Healing is uncomfortable and yet so sacred for our existence. Healing demands trust, patience, and surrendering. Because it knows we all are destined to bloom and break the karmic contracts that our soul got from our family, ancestors, and even from our mind. And healing doesn't need to happen after a life-threatening disease, or after losing the safe net of career, or after a rough breakup. It could happen as soon as you realize that you need to be home, that you need to bloom, and that you need to break all the norms. I am Chandresh, and this is Break the Norms. It happens very often when I work with people and they're hoping things are going to just bloom and become extremely cozy, comfortable. That's when they start to experience a lot of pain. The pain is emotional, the pain is mental, the pain is spiritual. All kinds of unheard pains start to show up, and then they ask me, this work was supposed to heal me. Why it's bringing me pain? And I tell them, because healing is painful. The right spiritual experience is supposed to be uncomfortable and yet the most relevant experience that you need to go through. And why that happens? Does growth always have to be painful? Does healing always have to be painful? And the answer is no. It becomes painful for us because we have been avoiding pain all our life. We have been avoiding the conversation, the experience of pain all our life. Everything around us is designed in a way that we keep on avoiding the pain. Sometimes our parents give us too much shelter. Sometimes a religion becomes that sort of layer around us that it continues to take us away from the experience that we need to go through. And when the right experience starts to happen, guess what happens? We start to feel the pain and it gets uncomfortable. It gets really challenging for our mind to go through that because we are so trained to avoid the pain all the time and simply live in the survival, simply live to survive, that's all. But the growth is not going to happen unless we are truly willing to face that pain. And this is why I felt I need to have this episode, because every time I come across someone who's about to go through a breakthrough experience, who's about to really bloom and go beyond their comfort zone, they step back because the pain shows up and they don't want to deal with it. And it's also very surprising to a lot of people that why pain is showing up when success and healing, they all are connected with just, joyful moments, just good vibes only. But good vibes only is such a, I think, corrupted way of living life, because you're not going to have the good vibes all the time, my friend. And if you have been listening to me or even reading my work, you can tell how much I continue to talk about good vibes only spirituality, because it's not spirituality. Good vibes only is simply a drug that you can escape into and avoid the all vibes of life, escape all the seasons of life. The problem with our human growth, the way our parents raise us, the way society raises us, the problem is that we are taught to avoid pain, and avoiding pain is the accumulation of pain. Every time you avoid a certain conflict, a certain pain, trust me, you have nicely kept it under the carpet. It's only going to sting after a while. It's only going to come out of it as a monster. I don't know how many of you have seen Stranger Things. I vaguely remember this episode. I think it was season 2, when they had this little creature in the basement and they just keep it there. Those little kids, they just keep that creature in the basement and they keep feeding it. And I think by the end of the first episode, or even after, I think few episodes, he becomes a monster and he's the main villain in the entire season. And that's exactly how we, deal with our pains. We keep them safely, we hide it, we bring it out, talk about it. And when it becomes a monster, too big to handle, too ugly to fix, that's when things start to complicate. And I've said this very often, that if you want to become an actor, don't join the acting school, get married. Because there's so many married couples today who are such great actors. They continue to act in front of society because they don't want to bring out the ugly part of their marriage. Because every culture teaches them, don't talk about this particular stuff out. Just deal with it within the four walls of the room. Or you're married, you simply have to go through it. Even if it becomes toxic, abusive, that's marriage, just go through it. And we are given such a toxic definition of marriage and bond that it ends up really killing our soul. And we continue to accumulate that pain. And at one point, it just becomes too intense to handle. So if you want to grow, if you want to heal, you got to understand your pains. You got to understand why you're feeling the pain. Because the pain is really a symptom. Pain is guiding us where exactly things are going wrong. And you need to pay attention to your pain very closely. Because when you avoid pain, you're also avoiding pleasure. And I don't have to prove it to you. You simply will see it yourself. If you take a moment to self-reflect, if you take few meditations within, you will fully know that if you are avoiding pain, you're also avoiding the pleasure of life. I know so many people who have been avoiding pain, who have been avoiding a conflict, who have been avoiding the challenges. And when the time comes to be happy, to dance, to be playful, they're not able to be playful. So many people I come across who are dealing with relationship problems, sexual problems. One of the core fundamental root is that they have been avoiding pain. They have been avoiding dealing with pain because, many times they just didn't have any guidance. They were too afraid to talk about it. They were too afraid to deal with it. And that starts to translate in the pleasure also, because pain and pleasure, they're part of one thread. Once you start to understand the one side of thread, the other thread also becomes easier to understand. I fully know my own journey that as a teenager, I would not cry when I wanted to cry. I would not express my love when I needed to express. For me, I love you was simply, that was said to your romantic partner because, Bollywood movies and the Hollywood stuff, it starts to brainwash you. It starts to give you a very one-dimensional definition of love. But thankfully, when I got into Tantra, when I got deeper into my spiritual practice, I became much more comfortable and much more willing to be vulnerable with my emotions. And the biggest change that I started seeing was how amazingly I was able to express my pain and pleasure. How amazingly I was willing to say no and say yes. It all started to become so effortless. So when someone comes to see me and they tell me they have not been able to experience, joy in the relationship, or the spiciness is gone, or they're not able to fully enjoy life, or they're not fully able to meditate deeply, they're not able to feel the bliss of divinity. My first step, the first troubleshooter, is to go into their pain areas. What exactly have they been avoiding? And then try to take them to the roots of the pain. The root is very important, my friend. It's in the roots that you're going to truly understand where exactly the foundation was wrong. I recorded the Root Chakra podcast. I would highly recommend that you listen to it because the root is our foundation. It's in the root chakra that things start to become complicated. And our family and our society, religion, everything, they all gather together and they start brainwashing us and they start teaching us how to avoid pain and pleasure so perfectly. That's why we are not encouraged to discuss death. We are not encouraged to discuss the painful, areas in society, in painful parts in religion, because they feel by simply avoiding, we are going to resolve the problem, but the problem is not resolved by that. And I'll share something very personal with you. I remember when I lost my sister, that was the first pain, first experience of death, and I was 16-year-old. I did not know how to process it. It took me few years to fully process that, fully understand, but that was also the turning point in my life where I started to dig deeper into my spiritual journey through the perspective of death. Before that, spirituality for me was having fun, traveling with my father, spending time in monasteries, going to the goddess temples and just having fun there. Meditation was fun. Mantras were fun. But after her death, it took a very different journey for me, very different direction for me. And I thought accepting and understanding this pain is going to be really helpful. And a few years later, when I was, I think, 19 or 20, my best friend passed away. And I was in New York at that time. And I remember I stopped going to classes. I stopped, going to my job. Everything became meaningless for me. But my sister's death sort of prepared me to face the death of my friend, although it was a traumatic experience and it's still with me. I feel the pain every day, but I don't feel the suffering because I was able to understand the root of that pain so much. And what these two people, my friend and my sister, what these two people did for me, they gave me a huge meaning in life. They gave me a huge depth to explore within my own consciousness. And these two prepared me to face the biggest fear of my life, which was the death of my grandparents. And I remember when my grandfather was falling sick and I knew that he's dying, I took a trip to India and I would just sit next to him. No talking, no discussions, just sitting next to him. And that became my meditation, to understand his death, to understand how he's leaving me slowly. And few years later, my grandma, which is basically past year, she passed away. And I took 4 trips to India and I would find an excuse to travel to India just to sit next to her. That's all. And I fully knew this is it. This is going to be the end of my, physical meetings with her and something new will open up. And I cannot imagine that if I had not gone through the previous pains, if I had not gone through the understanding of previous pains, there was no way that I could have gone through her death in a peaceful way. Because since I can remember, I still remember the grade I was in. I was in 5th grade. And that was one of the first times I questioned, when is she going to leave me? When is she going to die? And I realized that, grandparents die when you are above 30 or above 35. And I was in 5th grade. So I kind of relaxed at that point. I thought, I'm still so young. Nothing is going to happen to her for a while. And in the last few years, when I started seeing her getting weak, the body's, losing the strength, and I kind of started feeling the time is coming. But it was the understanding of pain that started to heal me. And maybe one day I'll write in depth about the entire experience. But as of now, I can tell you, her death really opened the biggest doors of self-realization for me. And the secret sauce is to basically know the root of your pain. And I'm able to grow emotionally, mentally, and spiritually only because I'm willing to release the pain. And the pain find its own outlet. It doesn't have to always be one dimensional process. It could be, multidimensional process. The pain could find a release through conversations, through actions, through creativity, through meditation. All of us are going to have our own way of expressing that pain. But by not dealing within yourself, it's going to haunt you. And by that, I don't mean that sharing on social media is the ultimate way. I'm not even a big fan of that, because I feel when we release such painful private moments on social media, we start getting the support and comments, but they all vanish after a few days. And then again, you're left with your own misery. I feel the time to share on social media is when you're able to understand it from a deeper perspective, when you're able to really see things from different lenses, and then feel free to share it wherever you want to share it. But it has to start from you. If you have not dealt with it within yourself, social media is not going to help, because you're going to see comments of people which are going to be compassionate but also judgmental. So when the mixed comments start to come in and you're not able to handle all of that reaction, it's going to make things even more complicated for you. So the first route, the first step is to truly dig deeper within and understand why exactly I'm feeling this pain. Is it telling me something about my own behavior pattern? Is it telling me something about how I deal with relationships? Is it telling me something how I deal with the issues of abandonment, self-love, self-worthiness? Pain could become the most important and beautiful friend if you're willing to understand it, if you're willing to dig deeper into it. And the truth is, we are not encouraged to live in the unknown. And that's why so many people are afraid to dig deeper into the pain. And if you have been to my talks, if you have been listening to me on any platform, you will know that I am a big advocate of encouraging the experience of unknown. The true experience of meditation happens in the unknown. That experience has no reference with any book, any teacher. It's your own experience. And this is why I don't recommend that you read a lot about certain chakras, about spiritual experiences, because your mind starts to manifest those experiences and it starts to create its own illusion, its own story and narrative. The truth is, our life is designed to bloom in the unknown. And if you start to get attached with the idea of known, then you are limiting yourself. You're limiting the entire potential that you carry within. If you identify yourself as Indian, American, Hindu, Muslim, Christian, then you are going to get stuck in how these elements are defined by society. Even if you identify yourself too strong as the gender you are, then again you are limiting your experience of life. And we don't grow spiritually or emotionally when we start to get too attached, too clingy with our identities. These identities are simply given to us by others. These identities serve only one purpose. They define us, but every definition and label also limits us. So it's important to understand the identity, and it's important to understand the root of that identity so that you can also liberate yourself from it. I can understand when you're growing up, it gives you a sense of comfort, a sense of belongingness when you know I belong to this identity. But as you start to become adult, the same identity becomes the most corrupted part in you. I come across so many people who are successful, famous, popular, but their misery comes from this illusion of what they think they should be or what they think they are. And those identities limit them creatively, financially, spiritually, in every possible way. But when you start to lose the grip of these identities, when you start to embrace the unknown in life, the magic starts to happen. The magic starts to happen in a very powerful way. And your mind is not going to like it because mind is basically surviving on the known experiences. The fuel of the mind is known experiences. But when you let go of the known and you become open to unknown, mind starts to feel panic. But your awareness starts to find its strength. Your awareness starts to become more powerful. And that's why I feel you just need to have more and more healthy relationship with your awareness, because that's where you're going to find the courage to be into more unknown experiences. It could start with something as simple as simply going to a restaurant and having food there without looking at the Yelp and the 552 reviews on Google. It could be simply meeting someone who added you on Facebook without really stalking them, 5 years history, and just getting to know them as one-on-one. The good old school, friendship foundation, which was based on just how you are connecting with them in that moment. I meet people who are, really able to connect well online on the chats and on the Snapchat, Instagram. But when they meet in real, they don't have a lot to exchange because they have really exhausted all that fire, all the energy in the chats. So I feel it's so important to let go of the known, let go of the safety net, and really dive deeper into what's real, what's vulnerable, and what makes you a little uncomfortable at times. Because the idea is to let go of the known, and that can only happen when we are truly ready to be uncomfortable, to be challenged. And one of the reasons I started the podcast, because I wanted to experience that discomfort. I have to admit, I've been doing this for 10 years, just talking about spiritual stuff and working as a spiritual advisor. Things got too comfortable for me at point, and I felt I'm losing the creativity. The talks, the writing, meeting clients. When you're doing this for 10 years, I just needed a little more challenge. I needed something more that can make me feel nervous. And I needed to dive deeper into my own subject, into my own study. So I made two important decisions. One was to start this podcast, which made me so uncomfortable in the beginning. You have no idea. And the other thing I did, the other decision I took was to dive deeper into Tantra, because Tantra is so vast. I can spend lifetimes on studying Tantra, and even that won't be enough. So I decided to dig deeper into the side of Tantra, which needs a lot more time, a lot more investment energetically. And I have been doing that. Let's see where it takes me. But I needed to go through those experiences. And I can feel one thing, it's changing me. As a speaker, as an author, as a spiritual advisor, it's bringing me a lot of powerful changes already. And I'm so glad. And that's why I encourage you, just break your comfort zone, break the known areas and go into the unknown area within your field. There's so much unknown there that still needs to be explored, and you can do it. As you start to go into the unknown, you will start to feel the growth is happening. The healing is happening in its own organic way. So what started with knowing the pain, knowing the pleasure, and moving on to the unknown, and then third layer that starts to open up in this organic growth is acceptance. Without acceptance, everything is meaningless. Acceptance is the true form of spirituality. If I'm not accepting my own existence, I'll never be able to accept the existence of you, of divinity, of everything around me. So when I come across someone who's not accepting me or accepting something in its own natural form, I clearly see it deep down. They are not able to accept themselves. And if you're not able to accept yourself deep down, it's going to affect everything around you. It's going to affect how you attract money, how you attract bliss, how you attract relationships, how you attract healing and growth. It's going to affect everything, my friend. So acceptance has to happen in as natural way as possible. It should not happen simply because I am telling you. It has to happen because you're willing to be home. You're willing to nurture and bloom. To be free of pain, to be free of suffering, acceptance has to happen. Because suffering is really the refusal of pain, it's a denial of pain. And it's an expectation that our life should be pain free, it should be only good vibes. So if you are in a zone where you expect only good vibes, only pain free life, then suffering is not too far. Because suffering is the result of all the denials, all the illusions and spiritual bubbles we create around us. I have known people who were very religious, very spiritual, but when something really crazy happens in their life, for example, they end up losing someone really close to them, or the business crashes, or something really terrible happens, their first attack is on their God. The first attack is on their divinity, on their awareness. And they feel this entire spirituality is nothing but BS because it did not save our life. It attracted all the crazy stuff. And that happens because they are not able to understand the nature of life to begin with. When you understand the nature of life, you stop blaming everything and you start accepting life as it is. You start accepting your own self as it is. And this will translate to acceptance of the people around you. They may not fulfill your expectations, and that's perfectly okay. But you understand where they are coming from. So there's more compassion and understanding. And this leads to much more, better mental health awareness, I think. Because if I feel every spiritual person should be vegan, I will put that expectation on every student, every client of mine. And if they are not vegan, then it's going to make me angry. It's going to make me feel terrible about them. And I may not even accept them as students fully. But when I understand that I'm putting this expectation on them, I'm putting a certain norm on them, then I'm limiting my role with them. Then I'm limiting how much I can offer them. But when I truly understand from where they are coming from, then energy starts to flow on its own. And this is the reason I've never told any of my student or client that you have to fulfill a certain set of expectations to be my student or client. But the best part is when they start to evolve in their awareness, all the beautiful things start to become part of their life. So it happens in a very organic way, rather than coming from me and they simply following it blindly out of respect, because that's not how I wish to see spirituality blooming in anyone. It has to happen through a deeper choice, a deeper conscious awareness. When you start to understand who you are, when you start to respect who you are, the others start to show that respect to you. The others start to honor that value of you. And this leads to such a beautiful and organic growth. The suffering starts to melt away. The impulsive desires start to melt away. And you are left with strength, courage, understanding, and a lot of sacred space for your healing, a lot of sacred space for your growth. And this episode on healing and growth will be incomplete if I don't mention love. I feel unconditional love is so underrated. It's so misunderstood. When you truly start to become love, when you start to experience love as a state of awareness, then the true healing starts to happen in you. Then you start to come home. Then you start to experience your potential. You start to experience who you are really and how you're willing to give your energy to others, how you're willing to share with others. Right now, the definition of love is very complicated. We keep squeezing happiness out of everyone and keep calling it love. We keep expecting too much from others and put our expectations on them, and it's attachment, but we keep calling it love. We keep seeing love as one of the major outlets for sex, but that's sexual hunger. That's again not love. Love is much deeper, much more sacred, much more powerful experience of awareness. and it has many layers. And of course, that's a different podcast altogether. But trust me, if you want healing to happen, if you want growth to happen, then you got to understand the nature of love. Then you got to understand love is multidimensional. Love has so many various layers, and how you deal with love becomes one of the most powerful instruments in your healing. You have to become open to the energy that's coming to you, and that will happen through love. Healing does not mean that you will only go out when there's healing out there, when there's sunshine out there. Healing means that you experience all the seasons of life. Healing is not at all a constant journey toward attaining something. In fact, healing is understanding that everything you need is right here in this moment, and you need to stop the chase. You need to stop running behind the various ideas of spirituality. Healing does not mean that you need to try out Kundalini, mantra, mindfulness, Vedic meditation, and every possible psychic stuff out there. It simply means that you need to fall deeply in love with just one aspect of spirituality, and everything else will open up. It's that simple. But we make it very complicated because our mind does not understand simplicity. I feel healing is so simple that its simplicity goes against it. People feel, oh, healing could not be this simple. I thought I have to take a trip to Himalayas. I have to go through some really crazy stuff. But healing is very simple when you start shifting your perspectives. When you start to fully know and understand your pain areas, healing becomes really simple. And now it's time for some questions. I'm not mentioning the names of anyone, but these questions are from the website, Instagram, and Facebook. The first question is, do you think my pain will lead me to growth? So my response is, the pain doesn't have to lead to growth, but the growth definitely leads to certain important pain that you have been avoiding. So instead of focusing on the pain, focus on the growth. Focus on what can really empower you. Focus on how you can experience self-worthiness. Focus on how you can experience more self-acceptance. Focus on how you can let go of the narrative of how others define you, how others bring a validation to you. When we give our value, when we depend on others for our value, our validation, it becomes a source of suffering. So the pain constantly, stays with us, and it keeps on reminding us of all the bad experiences, all the crazy stuff that has happened. So we don't find enough creativity, enough space in our mind to focus on the growth. But the truth is, if you can focus on the growth area, on what makes you feel really joyful, what blooms you, what brings you power and courage and strength, it leads to certain important pain, but also leads you to many important creative aspects of you, which you completely forgot about yourself. And if you feel your pain will lead to growth, then you will keep on clinging to the pain, which I don't want you to. I want you to shift your perspective from the pain to the lessons that this pain is giving you, to the growth opportunity that this pain is bringing you. So try to meditate on the pain itself and find out the root of that pain, and then write down what exactly empowers me, what exactly brings me strength. And when you write it down, read it and meditate on that, and hopefully it will lead you to certain healing, certain organic growth. That's what the goal is. It has to be organic. It has to happen in the most gentle and nurturing way. So, second question, can you be focused on growth too much? It depends. How do you define the growth? If this question is coming from someone in Wall Street, and most of my clients define growth as the growth in their balance sheet, the growth in their stock market, the growth in the numbers they are making every day. So I tell them, you're over focusing on this growth, and that's not healthy, and you need to let go of it. But if it's coming from someone who wants to meditate, someone who wants to heal, and if they ask me, is too much meditation? Is there something that's too much in meditation? I would say no, there's nothing that's too much in meditation, but that also means give yourself enough time to translate your meditation into practical actions, because meditation without actions is irrelevant and actions without meditation is meaningless. So you got to bring in the actions as well. You got to bring in the compassion. You got to bring in a lot of other seasoning in your meditation, in your journey. So reading the question again, can you be focused on growth too much? So I would want you to know, how do you define growth? If your growth includes meditation, mindful actions, love, compassion, joy, playfulness, then definitely there's nothing too much in this. But if your growth is focusing on just one dimension of growth, which could be only sitting on the meditation cushion all day, or only making money, or only traveling constantly, and not really bringing a balance to life, so then I would say you're spending too much energy on just one dimension of life, and you need to experience the other dimensions of life as well. So that would be my answer to the question. And now I got to answer this one more question. This was sent to me on Instagram and I'm trying to track it. All right, here it is. So she says, how to differentiate between resistance as an opportunity for growth versus a sign to choose another path. Sometimes that keeps showing up for me, and I would like to keep peeling back the layers on this one. I think it's a really important question, and I really come across this very often. I once experienced it with my own journey. There's resistance, there's also mixed signs that our mind gives us, and we start to wonder, what exactly do we need to see here? What exactly is the lesson for us here? So I would say sometimes the resistance happens because we are too afraid to experience the unknown. We are too afraid of the failure, and we are too afraid of just experimenting, and we want to stay in the safe net. So these are few questions that I would want you to meditate on to begin with. Is it bringing me fear of failure? Is it bringing me fear of unknown? Is it bringing me a fear of just experimenting with something new? And if yes is the answer to them, then it's simply fear limiting you. It's simply fear blocking you. And now the step 2 will be, imagine these fears don't exist anymore. Okay? And then you got to ask yourself, if these fears don't exist, does this idea brings me empowerment? Does it make me feel full of courage, love, joy, creativity? If yes, please go for that. Then you simply got to keep showing up for your own strength, keep showing up for your own journey. And if this decision is coming because you think this is the trend, everyone is doing it, and you also need to go into this journey, then it's not for you. It has to come from a deeper source of courage, a deeper source of joy. And I can give you my example. I always resisted the spiritual path. I mean, I loved meditating. I loved sitting in meditation for hours. Even as a young kid, teenager boy, I always was fascinated with this. And people used to ask me, you meditate a lot, you go into these spiritual texts so much, is that what you want to do? Do you want to follow the footsteps of your lineage? And I used to answer instantly, no, that's not what I want to do. I want to be in business line. I want to get into stock market, get into all that kind of stuff. And because deep down I used to feel I'm not qualified enough to be a spiritual teacher. I'm not qualified enough to match to the strength and awesomeness of my father or of my lineage. And I kept on avoiding this, but this path kept on showing up in a very interesting way. And I don't even think I shared this ever on a public platform, but when I was giving the exam for my MBA exam, for the MBA entrance, it was GMAT exam. Right in middle of the exam, I got so frustrated. I felt so such a hypocrite within me that I'm not even feeling this. And I write articles in my college about living your truth, living your purpose, and I'm not living my own purpose. It feels like I'm taking this GMAT exam because everyone wants me to, be successful. And this is not who I am. I think I want to explore the spiritual path as a full-time professional, whatever it means for me. And I did not finish my GMAT. I just randomly answered whatever I needed to answer to fully quit the exam, because you cannot just quit. It has to reach to the end. That's what I did. And I set my own stage for failing in the GMAT exam, which I studied very hard for. I just did not want to do that. And I started showing up for what was showing up for me as well. The spiritual path was showing up for me forever, and I was not ready at all. And that's why I feel you got to show up before you feel you're ready. You got to show up for simply your calling. You got to show up for what your heart is telling you. So go for it if it's coming from the place of courage, clarity, empowerment, healing, growth, and joy. And if it's coming from a voice that's saying you got to follow the trend, or you got to do something with your life because everyone is doing something with their life, then it may not be the right path for you. But also sometimes by making mistakes, we know what we want to do. So definitely do something with it every day. If you don't do anything, then you will never know. So do something with what's showing up, and then you will know if it's right or wrong for you. All right, so that's all for today. Thank you for your messages, your questions, your amazing reviews. I read few of them and it definitely warmed my heart. It gives me so much encouragement, and it also brings visibility to the podcast. So if you like this podcast, definitely drop a quick review. I'll really appreciate it. And if you want me to talk on certain topics, feel free to email that through the website cbmeditates.com or through my Instagram, which is also cbmeditates. That's all for now. I hope this podcast may travel through the untapped universe of your darkness, light, courage, passion, and so much more. Please do subscribe and be ready to break your norms. I am so excited and very honored to be part of your sacred journey through this podcast.